Hey, I have a question for you today. Is your future nimble? We are going to find out today with Gary Mottershead. How you doing today, Gary?
Carrie, I'm excellent. Great to see you, and thanks for setting all this up for us. I'm really looking forward to this.
Listen, man, when we finalize this cover, this title, give us some backstory. What is the book about?
Well, maybe a little background might be helpful on this, in that I've been thinking about it for a long time. As you know, as you read the story, I've been coaching entrepreneurs for more than 25 years, and I've been in business, probably 40 years, but 25 years in this business. So when 2020 came, I thought, isn't this kind of cool? Can we look forward, look back, looking at eyesight 2020? And I thought, well, hindsight to foresight. I said, what could we learn from our last 20 years we could apply the next 20 years? Because my business was 20 years old. It was 2020, all those things that made sense. And I
Yes.
go, this is great. So start writing the book, and bam, March.
Pandemic.
Well, yeah, the pandemic kind of hit us in China first, because I deal with China. And but we didn't. I didn't think I was coming out of it. I'd already been shut down for 2 months by the time we got going, and then we got going for a couple of weeks, and it shut down again. And I said, "Oh crap, what are we going to do?"
Yes.
So I said, I'm halfway through. I'm going to finish it. So I finished writing the book because I really felt that, and I really appreciate how the title came about, because we've always been fighting a battle. Anybody who pays any attention to what's happening geopolitically,
Yes.
China and the U.S., deal what's happening in supply chain and transportation and all the issues that go on, dealing in other cultures, which I've had a chance to do. So it just became when I said, well, what have we learned? How have we managed all of this? And how have we brought our entrepreneurs? How have I brought my team along through this? And I said, well, I wrote a book earlier. You can see the name up behind, called Guanxi, and it was about Guanxi is a trusted relationship, the expression for a trusted relationship in Mandarin. And so that was about the past. And I said, well, how can I help this next generation think about what's going on? And as we know from things like abundance and other areas, the future gets faster than we think. But I said, you know what? We're still humans. There's only so much we can take in. So how can we take in the information that's important for us and still stay relevant, stay current, and still be excited about the future?
Oh, that's so good. Well, and Gary, you are a fantastic coach. I know we have a lot of people jumping in. This is going out to Facebook. It's going out to LinkedIn, YouTube, multiple channels, X. We only have the users here, the viewers on one being calculated here, but literally there could be hundreds that watching now, and certainly on the replay. So you have had this amazing coaching gift. In fact, before I even knew you were a coach, I'll never forget, I was on a breakout group with you, and I thought, this guy is really a good coach. We were in a breakout group, and I thought, he's just a good coach. He's asking questions and he's showing up filled up. And then I found out you were a strategic coach, associate coach, which I love the fact that they make the associate coaches be real business leaders, real entrepreneurs. So maybe give us a little bit of that history. Like, how did your relationship with coach start? And then, like, why did you say, look, I want to devote part of my time, not just to my business, but also to coach entrepreneurs too?
Yeah, that's really. I'm glad you bring that. It's really kind of interesting, because I was in business. I had a tire recycling business, and nobody knows anything about that, very little. And so I find at a Christmas party one time that my wife is part of the Exxon group, and the person there says, "Oh, you're an entrepreneur, Gary. You got to go to Strategic Coach." This is back in April of 19. This is back in December of 1990. So I met Dan in April of 1991, so almost 33 years ago.
Wow.
And then I said, well, I'd worked for DuPont, I'd worked for the Exxon organization, and now nobody's teaching me anymore. I'd go to courses, the
Ah,
zero selling, all those courses. I'm on my own. And so I get introduced, I go to an intro presentation with Dan in April of 91. And I go, man, this guy's either really crazy or he's really onto something, because I think like he does. And talking about the great crossover, crazy things. And then I said, maybe it's probably both. And so I said, all right. So I signed up. Started in November of 1991, because I needed help. And I went to my first two workshops and say, oh, this is great. I missed my third one. They wondered whether I was ever coming back again. But
yeah.
somehow Susan Aldrich, who was there at the time, convinced me, and I came back. And I stuck with it, because Dan talked about the future, and he really, and I resonated with what that was about. And nobody else was really talking like that.
Mm.
And so let's spin the story down. I never asked to be a coach. asked, well, I shouldn't say, I never asked the question, could I be a coach? I didn't know what was there. I kept thinking about it. And then when they said, well, why don't you come and help facilitate at these big tables? And I remember sitting at a table one day in Chicago, and Dan turns to me and says, how would you like to be a coach? I go, wow. I was always wondering what it'd like to be on the other side of the table, when you shake hands,
Wow.
we'll be on the other side. And that started the process. And they asked me, and of course, without knowing anything, I said yes. And I said, what's this going to be? And so in August of 1996, I got 2 workshops, one on a Wednesday, one on a Friday. Those were my first 2 workshops. And what was the part that I wanted to bring up was that I had to think about how could I stand in front of the room with people I'd been sitting with all this time.
Ooh, that's good.
And so I went back in my life and said, well, what have I done? And I could go back maybe till I was 17. And I remember being on the phone, talking to people, helping them through. I learned at that point in time, you can only help people who want to be helped. If they don't want to be helped, then it's not people I can really work with.
Yes.
But I went through my life to say all these things that I'd never been paid to coach, but I'd actually been doing those things outside because I'm a chemical engineer by training. None of that stuff was ever, in your world. And I said, so I had to, why about reinterpreting your past? That's exactly what I did. I went back and reinterpreted my past to be able to say, this is why I could be in a coaching position, to be comfortable and somewhat confident of being up there. So
That's so good. That is so good. Well, listen, if the world's foremost entrepreneur coach, Dan Sullivan, turns to you and says, how would you like to be a coach with my company? That's got to be a good day.
Yeah, it was, you know, and I always, when I looked at it, I said, this is awesome. I don't know how long it's going to last and what's going to happen, but here it is, 28, and getting into my 29th year later, more than 3,000 people. I just finished doing 2 workshops in Toronto the last 2 days, and 60 people over those days. They're exhausting, but really invigorating to see how people, the changes they make, that's what I get excited about, and that's why I ask the questions, Carrie. I mean, I'm just there as the sounding board, the way to bring things out in people, because I believe you have the answers,
Oh,
but I don't
yeah.
know you have the right questions to ask to get at the answer.
So good. Oh, Tanisha, that's quotable. That is quotable. Say that one more time about the questions and the answers. What
Yes,
was
I believe you, all the clients have the answers, but they don't know the questions to ask to unlock that answer.
folks, that's the type of stuff you're going to find in Gary's book. I mean, this is fantastic. Gary, talk to us about this cover, because I know you just immediately just latched onto this cover. We provide a mini comps, but you thought something about what is it? What is this about this cover speak to you?
Well, first of all, I think when we changed the name from my original sort of working title to Nimble Future, that really caught me. And you made a good point. We talked about that because that's what really resonated. That's what had to work for me. I
Yes.
had to do that, and we still have to do that. I mean, I don't have a business that's predictable. Like, for example, just the other day when the ship hit the bridge in Baltimore, it just cost us $1,000 to get another shipment in. So that's it. Everything that happens in the world happens. So being nimble. So when the term caught to us, I love blue, by the way. That's my blue color. I got blue eyes, and so blues, so it kind of stuck with me, blue. But what really intrigued me was the hand holding the globe kind of upside down, because you don't. The world is not straightforward all the time, and it, and
Interesting.
it, it just made me look into that picture and say, there's more depth to that. There's more intrigue to that, and that's what I feel about our lives. There's a lot there, but we have to look deeper into it sometimes to be able to see all of that. And so it just caught me, and it's really striking. So I really appreciate when we looked at different ways, all different things we looked at. That was really striking to get to me.
I love it. I love it. Listen, so much goes into a book. It's a huge sacrifice. It really is, for the author, uh, and yet it's an eternal asset. Like, think about it. I'm being mentored by people that have written books decades ago. So it lives on. It lives on beyond you. It's a legacy piece. And I think because of that, some people don't want to write a book because they feel like there's a lot of pressure. And yet here you are. And I think it's a great contribution to the world. Gary, you probably get it. I know you get these questions because when you're successful, people email you, strangers, and they say, Gary, can I pick your brain? And, you know, the first time you get one, you're flattered. The 101st time you get one, you gotta realize you need a filtering process. And so now when people say, "Gary, can I pick your brain?" rather than them being trying to afford your amazing coaching rate, which is like, you know, astronomical, and it should be because of the value you create. Now they can literally buy a book and get your best thinking. I've heard that nonfiction books are the densest form of information that somebody can digest. But like, let's unpack this back cover copy for a second. So, nimble, adapting. Um, Talk to us a little bit. Pull out anything you want from this, including some of
Yeah,
bullet.
I want to say something too that I think was important for the background is when I started writing it, and then I finished in in the middle of 2020. I let it sit for 2 years, 2.5 years,
Interesting.
and the reason I let it sit was that we were going through COVID. We had to figure out our world was going to be, how everything was going to unpack. And then even my wife, our anniversary was April of 2020, 40th anniversary. And so we'll go away at Barbados. And I paid for it, of course, 2 weeks before everything shut down. And so we finally got it in November of 2022. And the reason why that was significant, because I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure how well this was going to stand up. And so
Mm,
when I finally read it, my last day that I was down there, and I said, because carried this manuscript down with me, I read it over and I said, if it doesn't stand the test of time the last couple of years, it doesn't need to be published. It stays where it is, and we pack it away, and it goes. And as I say in my notes, I was really pleasantly surprised that it made more sense. And what we've seen since then, and I like what's on the cover of it, is that if anything, the last few years have taught us that uncertainty is going to continue. And
yes.
I just realized that that's a world that I've lived in. And I was accepting it, but a lot of other people haven't accepted it. So I'm with all the information that can come to us now. I've always gone several years, developed filters. You talked about filters. I've developed filters for myself, and that not that I don't stay up to date. I consider myself to be quite current and top of things, but I don't have to take everything in. I look it through and say,
Mm,
what am I looking for? So we went, I know you were down at Abundance. I was at Abundance, and so much information comes firing at you. Well, so what am I looking for? Well, I look for specific things. And one of the most specific things that came out, because we've been playing with AI for more than a couple of years, was that you have to treat AI like a child. Latch on to that. So now you teach it. I said, why do you always have to say please and thank you to it? Because it learns. Well, fortunately, I've got 2 grown children, now a couple of grandchildren. We see how they learn, and so good. Now, there's no fear about AI. There's no fear about technology because I put it into a context that we can all live with. And so, whereas uncertainty and brings that fear, we call it,
mm.
but growth also brings, as we say in coach, fear, uncertainty, and discomfort. And if you're going to grow, you got to be able to live with those things, but you got to be able to take in information in such a way that it doesn't overwhelm you and
Just
paralyze you. So that's kind of a simple
that's
perspective on
so good. That's so good. Talk to us about this. I'm going to start in the reverse order because this one just popped out at me. But Nimble Future will teach you how to protect and nurture your greatest asset, your belief. Did you see a lot of people's belief get shaken? And
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, and even today,
Mm.
I'm we as again just finished the last couple of days. Is that when I asked people what their biggest complexity was, is that some of them said my own self belief.
Ah,
These are successful entrepreneurs, and so well, very much. You're a man of faith as well, and so I've always believed, and I've had to believe in something else other than me, but also I do know when you're we're all on our own in some respects, but we work together with a team, and particularly in entrepreneur, is you have to
yes.
believe in yourself. And the old expression is it's not how many times you get knocked down, because that's going to happen. It's how many times you get back up. And you
Yeah.
don't get back up if you don't believe, because I can't tell you how many times they told me, Gary, you can't work with China.
Yes.
They're gonna steal from you. They're gonna sell you crap and everything else is gonna go down there. Well, I got them to sell to me and not pay them till I could afford to pay them. I've worked with them for 27 years and have good friends, and I recognized they wanted the same thing that we wanted to. So you always
Interesting.
work with people's motivation. So if you don't believe, it's never going to happen.
Wow.
Never
Wow.
ever.
Listen, man, there's people weighing in from all over I knew this was gonna be a big one, but you have Gary's the GOAT. I love it. I love it. You have, Mary who said, "Look, your style and approach." I think you have this, calming yet, a coach, in my opinion, a good one. I mean, you have all types of coaches, but you have this calming yet searing truth style, which again, like I don't not everyone wants this abrasive in your face, gonna but beat you up coach. How do you, what formed your approach?
I'm to me, I'm down to earth, and it's got to be real. I've never been involved in a lot of hype. I'm an engineer by training, and what's good about that is that things work or they don't work. There was no BS about it.
Yeah,
So it wasn't bullshit baffles brains because we have a product. It's got to meet a specification. It's got to work or it doesn't work. That black and white nature of the world we live in, coupled with the uncertainty of how they're dealing with the people, has really formed what I've had to work with, because
wow,
and so we got to be real.
yeah,
And I learned, really interesting, when you work with people of other cultures, they can read things pretty easily.
really,
You don't use your words anymore. I mean,
body
yeah,
language.
it's body language. And, when I first went to China, the first trip was a social visit. And I said, well, I'm going halfway around the world. I don't have enough money on, and you're making it a social visit because they want to know. Because they want to know they can trust you. They don't necessarily trust their police. They don't necessarily trust their governments, but they want to know they can trust you. And so they test you. And so you've learned, if you're not authentic, I mean, you know this very much, Gary. If you're not authentic, people read that really, really quickly.
Yeah,
And I learned that I could not be Dan Sullivan. I knew I couldn't be Dan Sullivan. I can't follow him. I have to be Gary. And so obviously helping coach, I think, has made me more authentic in the sense that, okay, I'll tell people if it's wrong. I can tell people I spent, $200,000 or $300,000 doing something that didn't work. So these things happen to all of us. So that authenticity breeds a kind of trust and
that's
belief in what goes on. So that's the way I looked at it.
that's fantastic. Let's go to your company a little bit because I do love the fact that, you've mentioned a little bit about GCP. What if somebody meets you on an elevator and they say, "What are you doing?" Are these your main three things? What do you
Yeah,
do?
I love that. And GCP was, again, talking about the future. I think it's really important. I think I give this in the background too. When I started GCP, I'd been involved in the tire recycling business, and I got out of that business with my shirt, nothing else. People say, you sell your business. Yeah, I did, but I didn't. I fortunately only lost $100,000 that they wouldn't pay me, as opposed to.
Mm,
But at 45, I have to start all over. So something has to work, and I resisted working with the people in China for a couple of years. And what I learned from holding off and doing that is that what I loved, the fact was, I could see that the wave from China was coming, going back 25, 30 years ago. And so, like the surfers, they paddle till they don't know it's going to be a big wave. They have to paddle and catch a wave. And so I said, all right, you've got to anticipate what the future might bring. So I said, I think this is coming, and let's get this started. And they dealt with recycled rubber, and I said that was still my goal. I still believe I'm probably responsible for recycling more tires than anybody else in the world. Not having done all the recycling, but setting it all up. And I said, okay, let's continue that process. And so that's what got us all started. And then from there, it was, they kept asking me if we could do something else. And of course, I'd always say yes. Sure, I can do this. I can find it. And we just developed a skill and a capability of being able to source things for companies that they couldn't source themselves. And at the same time, because it's always a dual purpose, is the motivation from the people in China is they wanted to become world-class suppliers.
mm,
And they didn't know how to break out of that. So I said, okay, we'll deal with all of North America. It's the biggest market. And we'll make you a world-class supplier, but this is the way you have to make things.
wow.
This is the specs you have to make. And so that again, mutually beneficial long-term relationships is in there. The reason why that worked is I worked in their interest, our interest, and the customer's interests. I've always believed in strategic alignment throughout the chain. Not an adversarial relationship between suppliers and customers, but a cooperative relationship. Not everybody still believes that in North America, but I could certainly bring that in most of the world we had. So that's how GCP got going. And so, yes, we developed products and then we put names to it. We're the largest importer of industrial sheet rubber into the United States and silicones. as well. And just simply because we looked after what other people's needs were, and we facilitated both of those. So that's what part of being nimble is about. So
That's so good. Well, listen, you even on launch day, we're being nimble. Right now, it's leaking into 40,000 channels around the world. It's in Barnes and Noble, ebook, paperback, hardcover is coming soon, audio is coming soon. How much of entrepreneurship do you have to just start? Because I feel like with, you've seen a lot more entrepreneurs in your life than mine, but it sounds like some entrepreneurs maybe never get off the ground because of perfectionism or fear of looking dumb or failure. Like, how much of that is in the Nimble Future that you address?
I, and I do address it because the book was originally built around business, and I think the one thing that people really get confused at is they have to have this great, wondrous, massive idea. We get taught about what unicorns are now out there. They're billion-dollar valuations of companies. And I go, no, 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 that's not where it starts. You see what isn't working in a world, and then just go and try and deal with it. And so it can start really small. We started with one order for $20,000, and we built it to 20 million. One order at a time. And so it wasn't like we're going to start out at 20 million or 25 or 50 million or whatever it was. But what do you got to do? And I think what's more important for entrepreneurs at this stage is don't worry about how big it can be. Don't worry about comparing with somebody else. What problem can you solve? Mine was I wanted to bring more recycled rubber into the world, and I wanted to take advantage of what the cost structure could be and how it worked in China and provide the customers an alternative product that they might not have been able to get through their normal supply chains. That was it. And we went one step at a time, one order, one customer, one type of product, all at a time. That's it.
So good. I think you nailed it a few minutes ago when you said that our world, I see, when I go on X, Twitter, I see a whole society right now that is not on both sides, all sides. We don't know what's coming. Even at the abundance conference you and I were at, how many experts were on stage? And then the question was asked, where is this going? And they're like, we don't know. I mean, don't you think that more than ever, our world today, you almost have to have a nimble future?
Totally. And I want to completely believe that because I think the future is still exciting, by the way. And I don't care.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's still exciting. Still lots of opportunity. But we have to, in a lot of ways, we have to listen to ourselves. I talk about trusting our guts too. We have to listen to ourselves. And there's a reason why we have a gut. There's a reason why we do the things that we do. And so I had to get away from comparing myself to a lot of other people because I've coached some brilliant people and things that they all do. And I go, well, why am I this little guy over here in the corner? But I realize I do what I do. And so I think everyone's got to come and appreciate what they do.
Wow.
But don't get caught up in everything else that's going on out there and understand the information that they need in the world. It used to be that way, but we have access to so much information today. We have to create filters. We have to create boundaries. We have to create barriers in some respects, not to ignore things, but just to only take in what's going to be worthwhile for you.
That's so good. Talk to us about some of these other benefits. I know we talked about belief, and I think Dan Sullivan talks about like guarding your confidence. You nailed it with belief. In fact, I was with some university entrepreneurs who are just starting, and I said to them yesterday, like, the only thing people are buying is your belief, because we can sniff out unbelief, don't you think?
Absolutely.
I mean, when you're in a sales conversation, if there's any doubt that the person can't deliver, we can sense that. So, is this a book that if I had to tell people like, hey, in one sentence, this book is going to fortify your faith? Would you say that? I mean,
absolutely. And I think the faith in themselves,
interesting.
and the faith that they can do things because there's so much that's capable. And I mean, the one thing I wanted to pull out of that, build values through mutually beneficial long-term relationships. Don't just think about yourself.
Oh, that's good.
Don't think about yourself, because entrepreneurs have what we call a fundamental relationship. We got this from Coach, and that we have to bring value before we get a reward. If you're looking at your rewards, you put the cart before the horse. And
Interesting.
so if everybody wins, you're going to win. If you bring more value, you're going to get greater returns. And the only way you're going to do that is that learning from your failures, if you want to call them failures, because we don't learn unless we have obstacles. We don't grow.
It almost feels like, as I'm reading and know about you in your book, even the subtitle, Reinterpret Your Past, Protect Your Present, Engage in Your Future. It almost feels like the most nimble wins. What do you think?
I say also in the book is that I think some of the large institutions and organizations are going to have the most difficulty in the future.
Oh, that's good.
Because you see what's happening with AI. If people are afraid of it and don't adopt it or don't find a way to adapt to these things, then really what's going to happen is those organizations are in trouble. I got a cute little piece, if we got a moment. There was an author. He's passed away, named Douglas Adams, and he wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now he and I would have been at the same age, but he died in his late 40s.
Wow.
But anyway, so he wrote a trilogy in 4 parts, which is he's just kind of a cool, crazy guy, Brit. Anyway, so this one book, and I always remember this really clearly, and this is going back a long, 25, 30 years ago. And he said, you know what, the Earth, the planet that everybody was on was imploding. And so they said, okay, we're going to create 3 big ships. We're going to move all the population out. So they put all the executives and chief people in one big ship to go. They put all the middle managers in the one, the organizers in another one, and they put all the workers in another one. And they said, okay, we're going to send all the organizers and middle managers off. So they sent that ship off, and the other 2 went in another direction. They said, we're just going to eliminate all these guys from our world.
I love it. I love it.
So I said, that's what's happening to us. That whole debureaucratization is taking place.
Interesting.
Not providing another value are going to be gone. And this is a guy that wrote this in his own tongue-in-cheek way, back, 30 years ago or so. It's crazy.
Listen, you're dropping value. Our team loves you, by the way. I think here's one of your friends, Travis, but he reinterpreted what you said and said, the nimble win the future.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the book.
Yeah. And it's come from my whole life, because I'm not a very big person, and I've always had to learn to adapt in the world, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and it just got turned into everything I've done in my life.
So Gary, as we have about 2 more minutes left, I'm going to do a whole DOS little throw. I'm going to throw it at you here.
Okay.
So Gary, if we're having a chat 3 years from now and I say, hey, what happened with Nimble Future that made you feel really proud, satisfied, like this helped people, what would you say?
I would say that I've heard from people that this really made a difference to them, that they were able to look at their own lives and say, you know what, crystallize what they needed to do for themselves in the future. I mean, I did say one time, I'd love to sell 1,000 books. And he reminded me only 5% of the authors sell 1,000 books. So I kind of said, that's not the number selling. Everything else wasn't that important. And it's never been that important to me. But the fact that those who the message resonates with means something to them, and they can utilize this, and then hope they pass it on to their friends, pass it on to their children, because even though I'm in my generation, I think the next 2 or 3 generations younger than me, it's really valuable for them from that standpoint.
That's so good. Folks, the book is called Nimble Future, Reinterpret Your Past, Protect Your Present, Engage in Your Future. You can already see Gary's heart. You can feel the wisdom. This book is not theory. It's forged from true experience. He really has his skin in the game. The business is really becoming and has been an industry leader. And I'm so glad that I met you through Strategic Coach. So Gary, we're dropping links in to get the book. It's available all over the world. And thanks for being here.
Well, Travis, you and your team really made this happen and come about. And I'm delighted that we got a chance to meet on that virtual workshop that day. And we've had a chance to work together. I really, really sincerely appreciate that.
Absolutely. And big shout out to all your friends who, Russell and everybody who's been jumping in. But Gary, thanks so much and enjoy your launch day, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis. Really appreciate it.